WXII-12. This is a special report.
Good afternoon, I'm Jared Hill. We are breaking in to bring you the funeral procession for fallen Triad State Trooper Samuel Bullard. Right here is a live look at them leaving outside of that funeral. I believe that we have some images from that there. We're working on that. Right now, thousands that were gathered to honor Trooper Bullard, who died in a crash Monday night during a chase. We had a scene there. The governor is speaking at a podium right now. All right, while we wait for Governor Cooper to speak right after this funeral here, once again, we're going to listen into the funeral procession. As you can see right here, we are preparing for Governor Cooper to speak at this funeral. They're getting some of the equipment set up just before the governor comes to speak at that podium there. So once again, we are covering the funeral procession for Trooper Samuel Bullard, who's a 24-year-old member of the state troopers. He was killed just this past week in a chase during a crash during a chase that happened earlier this week. An unfortunate situation. It seems as though there was a checkpoint that happened, and then an individual in a car drove past the checkpoint. Trooper Bullard and another trooper went to chase after them. We're going to go to Governor Cooper now, who is speaking at a podium.
What did they say to you? It's my understanding you met with them prior to the funeral service.
I did. I told them that all of the state of North Carolina was grateful for Trooper Bullard's service and for their sacrifice. I also presented them with North Carolina flags and told them that I had ordered that the flags across the state be flown at half-staff in honor of Trooper Bullard. Of course, they're heartbroken. All of the patrol is, his friends, but we are deeply grateful for his service and his sacrifice. This was an extraordinary young man who worked very hard and did what he's supposed to do. We're grateful for his life.
What are your emotions right now?
You know, it's very difficult when we lose someone who is so servant-oriented and who knew the risks when he went out there. But it is still so difficult when something like this happens, a tragedy. And my heart is broken for this family and his friends and all of the patrol. What has been amazing, though, is how the Highway Patrol has pulled together and treated Trooper Bullard's family like their family. And another thing I saw was spouses and family members holding their trooper family member a little bit closer, because this brings the risks to them. It brings it home. It makes it all too real. And I'm grateful for all of the families out there who allow their family members to serve in law enforcement across the state, because we know it is a risk, and we know it requires courage, and we know that sometimes that there is sacrifice.
The out of state support, I mean, there's people from everywhere here. What do you say to those that travel thousands of miles to be here?
You know, law enforcement is a brotherhood and sisterhood, and people are coming from all around to show their respect for the life of this young man and for all of his friends and family. And we're grateful they're here in North Carolina.
You were one of the three speakers. The service ran about an hour. What was the most powerful thing that you heard? What is your singular takeaway from today's service?
I think it's that Trooper Bullard's life brings us all hope. I think that as tragic as all of this is, and as heartbroken as everybody is, that there is hope for the future. And it makes us want to make sure that we do all we can to support law enforcement across this state, to make sure that we work hard for better pay and for better training and for more support for them. And I'm grateful that everyone has had this time together to honor his life and to remember all of those other law enforcement officers out there across our state. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. The election has been sent out. You email our press office.
You're just hearing from Governor Cooper speak during just after that funeral for Trooper Samuel Bullard. I'm here with Pastor Ron Beatty, who is also the chaplain for Winston-Salem Police. You've covered it and worked a number of these types of funerals. One of the things that Governor Cooper mentioned was the family atmosphere, and you were talking about that as well, that is unique to this type of situation.
Yes, law enforcement is one large family that sticks together. The bittersweet of this is, the sweet is that we have people who every day hazard their lives, stand between good and evil, light and darkness. They know when they leave their families of a morning that they will be involved in all probability some very dangerous situations. I know the families are very anxious at home, especially in the society in which we live today. And they never know, like all of us, when they leave home, if they'll get back to their family. But one thing is sure, the possibilities of those in law enforcement not coming back goes through the roof because we're losing so many of our officers. And this officer was cream of the crop. He was A+ in so many areas, well respected in his community, the community he came from. The people there loved him, appreciated him. Law enforcement loved him. I talked to many people who knew the family, and I've also spoken to law enforcement personnel. Not one word of negativity. Everything was positive about him. His demeanor, his concern, his willingness to give his best. He was one of these officers, like so many of our officers, that believed in giving 1,000%. And when he went out on the job, he gave it everything he had. It's very interesting in his background that he basically worked his way through school.
You were talking to me about that.
Yeah, he worked his way through school. He worked with Meals on Wheels. He had a burden and compassion for other people. And he just set himself apart. There were times in his life when he could have gone in other directions, but he stayed on course, and that's commendable. He went out of this world doing exactly and precisely what he believed God had called him to do, and he gave it his best up to the very end.
What might be going through the minds or in the hearts of some of the other troopers and law enforcement that are at this funeral? I mean, we have had people from across the state, out of state even.
Well, of course, there's great grief and there's hurt when one law enforcement officer goes down like this, or however they go down. All of the law enforcement officers are greatly affected. But being in this and being a chaplain since 1992 and being involved in so much of this, I can tell you that one thing that really penetrates their minds over and over again is they recognize there's always a possibility that my family will have to follow me in the same manner that Officer Bullard's family is following them. But you know, they keep doing it because they know and they believe, as I said earlier, that it's a divine call of God. And we'd be living in a Wild West situation. That no one would be safe on the streets, no one would be safe on the highways, were it not for the dedication, the love, the commitment of these people who daily hazard their lives, that we can live with the freedoms that we cherish and we hold so dear. So they grieve with the family because this is family. And one good thing about this is that this family will need support, and law enforcement personnel will be there. I can assure you from being around law enforcement personnel for so long, they will be there. They will stand with them, behind them, in front of them, however they need their help. They will be there to encourage them. They will be there to pray for them. They will be there to provide for them. Whatever they need, they're there at a moment's notice and a moment's call to encourage them. And the family will need that. They're going to look at the empty chair. They're going to see the place where the car was parked, and they're going to see the pictures hanging on the walls and all of the things that will remind them of yesterday and days gone by. And they're going to need the encouragement of the church family. They're going to need the encouragement of the police family, law enforcement family. They're going to need the encouragement of the friends and the neighbors to come to their side, and I know they will receive that. But it's always good to know that when you're going through this, you're not going through it alone. There's a group of people around this family that will be there for their moral support.
All right, thank you. Dr. Beatty, we're going to go to our Kenny Beck, who has been inside of the funeral there, now is standing outside with some more perspective on how things are going. Kenny.
Jared, good afternoon. Good afternoon to everybody. Certain members of the media were allowed inside, not the funeral itself, but into sort of an overflow area where we were able to listen in. There was no recording allowed, no social media allowed, no phones allowed during that time, but we were able to listen and just take good old-fashioned notes. So if I may, I'm just going to run through some of the things that stood out to me. We heard from three people inside there. The officiating minister is Victor Church. He spoke at the beginning, the middle, and the end. We heard from North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, who you heard from just a few minutes ago when we took his brief press conference live just a few minutes ago. And we also heard from a representative from the North Carolina Highway Patrol, Colonel Glenn McNeil, Jr. Governor Cooper was the first person to speak. Among other things, we heard him say, "I know there are a lot of heavy hearts. When someone is taken from this life too soon, it can make us question forces that are seen and forces that are unseen. We don't have all the answers, but our shared faith in God provides us with assurance and with hope." We heard a lot of people speak about the kind of man that Trooper Bullard was, his character, his attention to detail, his infectious smile, how much he was loved and how much he loved his job, how much he loved to hunt, how much he loved to fish, things that we have heard from people throughout this week as we have been honoring him and helping to remember him. We also heard from the minister, and this really stood out to me. This was toward the end of the roughly 1 hour service. He said, "When we have a chance to serve, let's do it as Trooper Bullard would have done." He asked for everyone to not think about today so much as in cliches, but rather think about what is real. What can we truly take away from this, and how can we turn such a horrible thing into a positive thing that impacts our lives, not just today, but moving forward as well. We heard from Colonel McNeil. He said, "We are afflicted in every way, but we are not consumed." Interesting perspective. One other thing that I found interesting, June 21st, 2015, just a few weeks from today, would have marked the 3rd anniversary of Trooper Bullard joining the force as a cadet. We heard some humorous stories about his early days on the force. It was told he served with excellence, always smiling, and apparently just yesterday the North Carolina House and Senate in Raleigh recognized his service to our state. He was honored in our state capitol. Colonel went on to say his death affects us all. His mother, his sister, his father, his younger brother, his fiancée, Michelle Mathis, and the minister who spoke today was actually her pastor. He described the very first time that Michelle and Trooper Bullard showed up to church as a couple together. He said there was a palpable buzz in the sanctuary that day. People were checking him out, inspecting him, weighing in. They said he looked like a nice, clean-cut guy. Maybe this will be the guy. This looks like an upstanding young fellow, and by all accounts, by everything we know about him, those initial thoughts about Trooper Bullard were spot on the money. The colonel closed by saying the State Highway Patrol stands with you, the family, all those folks I just mentioned. We stand with you. We stand behind you this day and every day going forward. We heard Beulah Land performed toward the very end of this, and then the minister got up and said, "Frankly, I am longing for Beulah Land. I am longing for no more days like this, no more lawlessness. Christ is the light that always shines in dark places." Apparently, Trooper Bullard proposed to his fiancée on Easter Day, this past Easter, Sunday, April 1st. The minister joking, who pops the question on April Fool's Day? That got a pretty good laugh from the folks inside. He also said that he shared a text message that his fiancée, Michelle Mathis, shared with him. He shared that with the group today. He said, "Oh my gosh, Samuel just proposed to me at my grandparents' house. I laughed, I cried, and finally, I said yes." The minister also shared snippets of a letter that his fiancée, Michelle, wrote to Trooper Bullard posthumously. And I'll read portions of that I was able to scrawl down to you right now. She writes, "Samuel, you are the love of my life. I know God sent you to me. You always wrote me the most special letters. You helped me become a better Christian. You loved me more than could ever be described. You were and will always be the most wonderful state trooper in my eyes. I know you died loving me and every single part of you. I promise I will always love you. I will always love your family. I know you are with God, and I love you always." The minister also closing with a question. What what have we been taught? We have been taught a lesson about living. We have been taught about how to live our lives a little bit better, a little more like Trooper Bullard. The best way to honor him is to live our lives the way that he chose to live his lives. And he closed by saying, "We love you dearly, we miss you dearly, but we are also celebrating your homecoming." And that would appear to be a perfect way to segue into what you're looking at right now. And this is an impressive display for a number of reasons, not only visually, but also the power of the support that's happening right now as you see all of these officers, as they've been instructed to do, turn on their flashing lights. You can see the procession starting to begin. The funeral service wrapped up at about 2:23. We were told the procession would begin approximately 20 minutes later, and that is what's happening right now. It's about a 20 or so mile trek from this location over to nearby Rhonda, still in Wilkes County, and that is where Trooper Bullard is set to be buried. A graveside service at Macedonia Baptist Church, roughly 22 miles from the Walker Community Center here on the campus of Wilkes Community College here in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Personally, we saw law enforcement today from as far away as Wisconsin. It was a remarkable thing, and just the reverence. This is something that anyone in attendance will remember being at, and I have to imagine will be in some way affected for a long, long time. That's what's happening right now in Wilkesboro. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Kenny. And Dr. Beatty, I wanted to ask you a question about this. We were talking about this. What does this show of support from law enforcement, from the general public, what does this mean to the family?
It means everything to the family. The family, of course, has experienced a deep loss that they will carry with them to their grave. They'll never get over it. The wonderful thing is that God softens it, and he gives grace. Scriptures teach us that he gives grace for grace, and he gives grace sufficient. But it's kind of like a little boy that his mother sent him to his room one night, and he said, "I'm scared of the darkness." And he said, "Well, the Lord's with you." He said, "I want somebody with skin on me." Skin on him. It's good to know that we can trust the Lord and that his grace is certainly sufficient, but it's also wonderful to know that there's somebody we can touch. There's somebody that can sit in the living room. And sometimes the family don't really need somebody to talk to them. They need a good listener. They just like to sit down and express themselves and share what they feel. And then if they want input, it's good to have people around them that love them, and they'll give them good input. And they need good input in so many areas, because sometimes when we are very emotional because of death or tragic situations, sometimes it's possible to make decisions that under normal circumstances we would not make. And it's good to have people there. Somebody has rightly said that we don't make decisions when our decision makers broke. And it's good to have people around us, and the state patrol and all law enforcement, as you just heard, coming from way out of the state to say, "Hey, you're not by yourself. We're here with you. We're here for you, and we're going to be with you."
Moving forward for the troopers and for the family, what kind of role might a chaplain or someone like you play in helping them to get through this, get past this tragedy, and take his life and move forward?
You know, I think one of the great responsibilities that we all have when we minister to people going through such tragedies is the positive attitude and positive approach that we can say to them, and we can take and say to them, just a few words: "You can make it." They need to know that they can make it. Multitudes of people, and other sorrows doesn't comfort us. I understand that. But at the same time, it's good to look around and realize that multitudes of people have experienced these same tragedies, and they have made it, and they made it, of course, first of all, because of God's grace, and they've made it because there's been people there to take their hands, and they've said to them, "We're going to be here to encourage you, to help you, to strengthen you." to get you through this. So I remember years ago, my wife was killed, and I always remember what a person said to me. I've never forgotten it. They came to the head of the casket and they said, time and God's grace will get you through this. And I found that time and God's grace is a great healer. And it does indeed bring us through these terrible, terrible situations.
We've had a couple of shots of some of the everyday folks who decided to line up along the procession route to watch and pay their respects. Why do you think that, for someone that they may have never even met, never heard of until this happened, why do people feel so compelled to do something like that?
That's a great question, and I really believe, first of all, they're saying to the family, we are appreciative that this trooper and that all law enforcement personnel are willing to hazard their lives and put their lives on the line 24 hours a day for us. And I think they're saying to all law enforcement, we're behind you, we support you, we appreciate you. There's so much today negativity and the negative that's said about law enforcement, but it's so encouraging to the families. To see all of these personnel. I'm sure previously when I've been involved, up and down the highways, on top of bridges, flying huge American flags, just letting the family know we appreciate you, we're praying for you, we're behind you, we're here for you.
That's important sometimes. Speaking of that, I believe that we have our Bill O'Neill along one of the routes there with some of the folks who have lined up to pay their respects. Bill.
Yeah, hi, how you doing? We are on Red, White, and Blue Road in Wilkes County. As you see behind me, there are a number of people. There must be dozens of cars that are lined up along this road waiting for the funeral procession. Many of the folks we have spoken to here today, they are family, they are friends, they are folks who don't even know the trooper or his family. There are a number of people here who have connections through law enforcement. Many of them have been here for a couple of hours now, all hoping to pay their respects. There are a number of American flags on display to pay their respects. There are a number of American flags on display here. It is really kind of a touching and emotional afternoon. The people who have turned out, very sincere in why they're here and wanting to pay their respects not only to law enforcement, but to this family and to the community at large. They feel that they are saying something about Wilkes County, about Western North Carolina, about who they are, who their neighbors are, and how they take a stand here today on behalf of a fallen officer who lost his life in the line of duty. We are probably not that far away from the funeral procession reaching here. We are just off of Highway. I'd say we're probably, I don't know, in the neighborhood of 20 minutes away from that funeral service that ended just a short while ago. So folks here are lined up. They're waiting for this to happen. I got to imagine it's going to be brief. It's going to be very silent. And I think it's going to be a fairly emotional moment when that funeral procession comes through here. In Wilkes County, I'm Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News.
All right, thanks a lot, Bill. And the public is invited to watch a funeral procession from Wilkes Community College to the church. That's about 20 miles away from there. That procession will travel along Highway 421 south to Red, White, and Blue Road to NC 68 and end at Macedonia Church Road at the Macedonia Baptist Church, which is the location that Trooper Bullard will be buried. Also was the spot that he was set to get married in just a few months. All right, we're back out here live covering this really tough event. How do you think that this impacts a person watching this at home who may not necessarily have felt compelled to go out the door and go on the parade route, but in a time where there's such a conflict and such a butting of heads between, it seems like, some members of the public and some members of law enforcement, is this a unifying moment?
There's no doubt it is, just as we see the people lining the highways and the bridges. It's a touching moment for all of us. I was sitting in the room before I came out on the set a while ago, and I got teary-eyed just thinking about it, thinking about the grief that they're going through, and all of these people today that are sitting at home. And by the way, we want to thank Channel 12 Television for carrying this. It's so commendable that y'all been so concerned in the community, and we appreciate it immensely. But the people who are sitting at home, I can assure you there's some tears being shed there, and I can also assure you there's a lot of prayers that's being offered up for this family and for law enforcement in general. And at this particular point, nobody comes to the door and throws off on law enforcement. Everybody's pro-law enforcement today, and that's the way it ought to be, because we're coming front and center today, and we're saying we're thankful that these people get up of a morning and they go out there and protect us and protect our family. And you know, a lot of people in that area, they thought so highly of him. I was reading yesterday and talking to some people that knew him. He worked his way through college. He was a hard worker. He worked he worked with Meals on Wheels, which goes to say and to show that he had a servant's heart. He really wanted to help people. And his family talked about him and said that he was a gentleman at an early age. They never had any problems with him at all early on. They said he was an outstanding young man. And the State Highway Patrol sent me an email and said so many wonderful things about him. They said that he was a very quiet and soft-spoken, extremely polite, always saying, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, which goes back to his training. I was told that he was actually raised by a grandmother and a step-grandfather. And so he had some background back there that would have possibly caused some people to go in another direction. But he had some people there that loved him, and they taught him discipline, and they taught him to respect people around him. And he never forgot that. He took that with him to college. And when he became a state trooper, he took it with him in his car, up and down the highways of Wilkes County, everywhere he went with his comrades, if he was writing tickets, if he was in the courtroom, if he was with his family. Wherever you found him, he was a man deeply appreciated and respected because he carried himself well. And he loved the Lord. You know, that's something in times like this. We think about eternity, and we're all going there. And it's comforting to the family, it's comforting to the friends, it's comforting to police personnel, law enforcement, to know that he had made a profession of faith in Jesus Christ. And as the Apostle Paul teaches us in the Scripture, to be absent from the body for a Christian is to be present with the Lord. That's one of the greatest consolations we have today.
There you go. All right, thank you, Dr. Bader. We're going to go to Kenny Beck, who is live outside of Wilkes Community College, where the funeral just wrapped up not too long ago. Kenny.
Yes, indeed, Jared, and we've been talking about the impressive display, the turnout today. Law enforcement, not just from all over the region, but literally from all over the country, from different time zones. And here to provide proof of that is the man to my right. This is Chief Brent Newman from the California Highway Patrol. No short trip here to Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Why was this such a priority for you?
Well, Trooper Bullard represents a state trooper, which all 50 states have state highway patrols. And I'm privileged to represent 11,000 CHP employees, both sworn and professional staff, and to be the designee to come out here and honor his sacrifice and service.
Did you have the opportunity to speak with anyone in the North Carolina Highway Patrol about just the fact that you're here today?
I've been pretty much swarmed. It's very humbling by hundreds of officers all the way up to very senior ranks who I think were a little surprised to see us there. But we know that in California we've had our share of line of duty deaths. And when we see troopers from around the nation, it is profoundly comforting in a way that I can't quite describe.
Let me ask you this. We have a lot of people who are watching us. We're on TV live right now. A lot of people who are watching us, I have to imagine, at home right now, who are in some way members of the law enforcement family, whether they are on their day off and home and active duty, or the spouse of someone who is, or retired, or a family member. They know what this brotherhood and sisterhood is about. They know what this fraternity of emergency response and police is all about. For the folks who are outside of that group, who that is not a part of their world, can you put that relationship into words?
Sure. I think that in one way we're just normal citizens like everybody else. Really the only difference, if it is is that we are the paid, designated, trained people who volunteer to go out and do the difficult work oftentimes, and as we've seen here, sometimes deadly work, to protect all of us and to maintain public safety. And I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. The vast majority of our officers don't want any credit or just maybe occasional appreciation. What they really want to do is go out and serve. They want to make a difference so that at the end of their career, they've got a legacy of giving back. And this 3 years in, but boy, you could see that was happening.
A lot of people speaking glowingly about just his attention to detail, how much it meant to him, and that came up several times during the course of the funeral. What did you make of the funeral? When you go back to California, whether it's tonight or tomorrow, and you tell your fellow troopers, how was North Carolina? What was that like? What are you going to say? What's the biggest takeaway from the funeral as far as you are concerned?
Well, aside from the fact that it's humid here, we don't have that. But in all seriousness,
that must be lovely.
Yeah, it's nice. But in seriousness, what I took away is faith. I took away fraternity. There's a family. I feel a tremendous amount of support from this community. Just by being here, the words of the governor, the words of the colonel, as well as the pastor, it all wove together in a very honoring sermon and service, both to the trooper, but also his family. And I think we'll take away, my wife and I will take away just a feeling of comfort and the fact that things are done right here. He was honored appropriately.
Chief, we appreciate your time very much. I know you're flying out of Charlotte soon, so we'll let you get on with the rest of your day. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your service. And I know it means a lot to a lot of people that you are here all the way from Sacramento, California.
Thank you. We're honored.
All righty. Jared, that's what's happening right now from Wilkesboro as the crowd here begins to thin out and as the story begins to shift from Wilkesboro to nearby Rhonda, about 21 or so miles away, where that graveside service is set to get underway in the not-too-distant future.
Hey, Kenny, before we let you go, I did have a question, another question. You've been speaking to some widows of members of law enforcement. What have they been saying today?
Sure, and a lot of them were easy to spot. They were teary from the moment they got here, many of them in long black dresses, and I know a few of them from having worked in this market long enough and sadly covering their stories. I spoke with one woman who lost her Kitty Hawk police officer husband 9 years ago, almost to the day. That was the end of his watch. We're approaching that dubious anniversary. She is now president of the North Carolina chapter of an organization known as COPS. That's an acronym that stands for Concerns of Police Survivors. So not only is she a survivor herself, but it is now her job, it is her duty, it is her mission in life to make sure that families like the Bullards and like the Mathis family have what they need and are given the kind of comfort that can make the impossible a little more bearable. We spoke with her about what challenges all of these mourning families that are related to Trooper Bullard will face in the days and weeks and months ahead. Here's what she had to say to us. Oh, looks like we don't have her soundbite queued up, but I can paraphrase it because I did speak with her just a little bit ago. She told me that, right now, perhaps the full gravity of it has not sunk in. There are so many people, thankfully, gratefully, like the chief from the California Highway Patrol, for goodness sakes, that we just spoke with, who are here offering to help, expressing condolences, listening, and just supporting. Just their mere presence and the pageantry that we have seen here today and that we will see in the hours ahead, that does help. What she told me was, though, it gets a whole lot harder 2, 3, 4 days from now when that crowd of supporters, that network, when those folks start to return to daily life and when the true new normal sets in for Trooper Bullard's mother, father, sister, brother, fiance's family. That is when things become very real and extraordinarily difficult. And she would know. If anybody would know, it would be her, because she lost her own husband in the line of duty. Her name's Kim Murray, and this was Sergeant Earl Murray, who passed away May 15th of 2009. She told me that he was responding to a 911 call in dreadful weather in...
All right, looks like we lost Kenny there. I believe that we have some drone footage from our Sky 12 of this funeral procession. You can see it right there going down the roadway. Dr. Beatty, I want to ask you a question. This is following up on what Kenny was mentioning, speaking to the widow of a member of law enforcement. Once all of this is over and all the people are gone and these families are dealing with this on a much smaller level, how do we help support them?
Well, this is when it's so vitally important that they get with groups. One of the worst things a person can do is to close themselves in four walls. They look at the pictures, they see the furniture setting and all of that. And it's important that groups of people come by. There's all kinds of services out there is available. But I always suggest that they start with their pastor and their church family. That's what they're there for. The Bible teaches us that we're to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law. And so the pastor's on the scene, their deacons on the scene, the church members are on the scene. And what he just stated is so true. This becomes a roller coaster. I like to say you peak out, you bottom out as the days come and go. After an extended period of time, you bottom out on a little higher degree. And it really takes a good 2 to 3 years after an event like this, with God's grace and with the help of so many people, that you can start moving in the other direction. You think about birthdays. You're always together with your family. You celebrate birthdays. You celebrate anniversaries. You celebrate Christmas. You celebrate Thanksgiving. Suddenly you realize there's an empty chair there. Yeah. And so often, as the months come and go, people are prone, they don't do it intentionally, but they're prone to kindly withdraw. They get caught up in their own family. They get caught up in their own affairs and things. And they're prone to forget their loved ones. And it's so vitally important that family members remember that they hurt on these special days, these special occasions, probably more than any other time, because they remember being together. They remember all of these times when they shared family together. So it's time to come front and center. I remember, as I said a while ago, I lost my wife. I remember we left Christmas and went to Florida just to get away. You know, after so many years, you still remember these things, but it softens after a few years. But it's crucial that we have support families, we have support friends, and of course, as I said earlier, law enforcement will be there. I know here in the city of Winston-Salem, when we have special events, maybe recruit graduation and things of that nature, if a widow of one of the officers here in our county or our city was slain, they will always recognize them. They will call their name. They even have an award for one of our slain officers, and many times his wife will be present to help bestow that award upon an outstanding recruit that's coming on board in the police department here in Winston-Salem. So they're not forgotten by the family of law enforcement, but sometimes, as I said, we get so caught up in living, we forget about the dying.
That's very, very true. Just in case anyone is just now tuning in, we are watching the funeral processional for Trooper Samuel Bullard. Died just earlier this week. His funeral was just a few hours ago now. His casket is being driven about a 20-mile or so stretch down 421 from Walter Center at Wilkes Community College to Macedonia Baptist Church in Rhonda. That is where he will be buried. That was also where he was set to be married in just a few months. Dr. Beatty, another question about this. Can you kind of give some context around why this type of processional might be happening?
Well, it's showing our respect for someone that gave their best and gave their life. And, you know, it gives people an opportunity in a time like this, multitudes of people not able to go get inside the building, but up and down the road, and the people that are going up and down the other side of the highway, they know what's going on. It's been in the news and on the news, and they're able to look over there and they're able to say, you know, we're so thankful, so appreciative that here's somebody. You know, the Lord said this, that greater love have no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. That's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
He laid down his life to make it easier for us and the people that could follow him. And he's left an example. He's left an example to his family. He's left an example to law enforcement that it pays to give your best. And in reality, in all probability, he could have accomplished more in 3 years in the influence that he's had, because he's had such a godly influence. He could have accomplished more than some people may accomplish in 20 years.
That is very true. Trooper Bullard's body is going to be transported during this procession by the North Carolina Troopers Association Caisson Unit. This is a team of troopers who are also highly trained to work with horses and to carry out funeral procedures for fallen officers. The team is ready to travel just within 24 hours' notice. The unit practices for these occasions every few months in various locations, really across the state. And as we've been hearing throughout the course of today, there have been troopers from not only across this state, but really from across the country. Our Kenny Beck was not too long ago speaking with a trooper who came all the way from California to pay his respects to Trooper Bullard. And as we've been mentioning, this is really because law enforcement is a huge family. And that family, as we see right there, is coming out in full force in support of Trooper Bullard and Trooper Bullard's family here in this situation. As the chaplain, Dr. Beatty, for Winston-Salem Police for the past few decades, you've presided over a number of funerals like this one. What's always, if there is one, your biggest takeaway from this kind of event?
I think one of the things that we all take away from it is we're mortal. That we are only here for a few short years at the longest. Early on in biblical history, they lived to be 969 years of age. We're not going to make that. No. If we make 100, it's revolutionary today. I think we need to be reminded, and I think every time we see something like this happen, I think we need to be reminded that all of us at a fast pace, we're moving towards eternity. And in 100 years from this very moment, everybody in this studio, everybody watching this, will probably be in eternity. In 50 years from now, probably many of us will be in eternity. And so it's vitally important that we understand and know Christ as our personal Savior and make preparation to go. And we want to so live like He did, that when we're gone, people can speak well of us and people can remember us as leaving an example for others to follow. Some of the state highway patrolmen shared with me yesterday the fact that he left a wonderful example. When he was asked, for instance, to do something, he didn't argue about it. He didn't question it. They said when they gave him a command, they gave him a project, they gave him a job, he was right on it. Never complaining. We live in a situation today, an environment where there's a lot of complaining. But they said he never complained. He was always glad to do whatever he was called upon to do. And you know, that sends a signal to the rest of law enforcement, especially state patrol people that knew him. They look at his life, and it becomes an incentive to them to continue on what he started. He's gone, but others can follow his example and be examples out on the highway. And I'm so thankful for so many people out there who are great examples and represent law enforcement well.
All right, let's go to our Bill O'Neill, who is on Red, White, and Blue Road now along that processional route. Bill, what are you seeing?
You know, we have seen people here that have been waiting more than 3 hours. I think that car right over there, the brown one with a couple standing in front of it, they were here sometime before noon today, waiting all this time for the funeral procession to get here. And they are among, I would say, in the neighborhood of 50 cars that I can see up and down Red, White, and Blue Road here off of 421. And folks, I don't know, upwards of 100 people easily that have turned out to see this funeral procession. Many of the people here are either related from family or friends to the trooper, or they have a link through law enforcement. Some are just folks who are neighbors in this community. They wanted to be here to pay their respects not only to the family but also to the trooper himself, as well as to the law enforcement community. They feel that they wanted to be supportive today, and that this was a good way to come out and show their respect, show their support for law enforcement, and I would say a touching kind of a day. I've talked with a number of people here about why they're here and why they wanted to come. Told me they thought that it was a great way to show that not only their respect, but what this community stands for. Wilkes County in general, Western North Carolina overall, that these are good people, that they believe in what they believe. They believe that law enforcement needs to be supported, and today they're here in many cases to support law enforcement. Perhaps did Bullard to come out and pay their respects to his family as well as law enforcement. That's what I see here, Jared, along Red, White, and Blue Road. There are cars literally lined up and down this road, people standing outside waiting for the funeral procession to come by.
All right, thanks a lot, Bill. Thank you for your perspective out there. We'll check back in with you in just a little bit. And Dr. Beatty, we're talking a little bit about who Trooper Bullard was and how really strong of a figure he was. It sounded like he put himself through college. Mm-hmm. It's not something that you hear a lot of these days.
That's so true. And I talked to a pastor yesterday that actually was raised in the community, and he knows the family, and he talks about this officer, and he talks about the family and how he, under some adverse circumstances coming along, they would have been glad to help him in a lot of areas. They just didn't have, the means, and some people have the financial means. He didn't allow that to stop him. He went on out there and he did the job. He did the work he needed to do. He put the effort forward, and he just determined that he was going to cross the finish line successfully, and he certainly did that. I received an email yesterday from one of the sergeants of North Carolina Highway Patrol, and he said this, and I thought it was so interesting and so powerful, talking about Trooper Bullard. He said he always wanted everyone to get along. He always wanted to avoid confrontation and never wanted people to quarrel around him. And then he said this about the officer. He said he was a peacemaker. Wow, what a testimony to leave behind, right, that he was a peacemaker. And something else that's so important, and I say this to family and friends and neighbors and church members and so forth. In just a few months, of course, he was to be married. Yeah. And Miss Mathis, she's going to need the support. She'd already purchased the wedding dress, and they had already ordered the wedding cake. The date had already been set. I think he'd probably already ordered the tux. Yeah, they were talking about this special day in their life. And this is going to be tough for her when this date rolls around, and she's going to need a lot of support. And I know those are good people in that county up there. I know a lot of those people. Yeah. And I know they're going to rally to her side. She's going to need that. But I know they're going to rally to her side, and they're going to help her. And with the help of the neighbors and the friends and the family, with God's help, she'll survive. She'll find that the Lord and the people will soften this blow to the extent that she can get through and go on with her life.
All right, I believe we're going to go to our Kenny Beck, who is standing out. Okay, we're going to wait to go back to Kenny. Dr. Beatty, is there any sort of protocol for whether it's things that are presented to the families here? I know that we heard that there was the North Carolina state flags were presented from the governor's office to the family.
I noticed that usually the presentation takes place at the cemetery. Okay. I don't know what the protocol goes here. I haven't spoken to them, but usually someone representing the North Carolina State Highway Patrol or someone else, they will drape the flag over the casket. They'll go through the procedures of folding the flag and handing the flag to them, and reminding them of their appreciation on behalf of the North Carolina Highway Patrol or of the police department or sheriff's department or whomever. So out of deep appreciation to the family, they're willing to do whatever they can to let them know we really appreciate you and we love you, and here's something just from us as a token of our appreciation to you for standing behind him and standing behind law enforcement.
All right, and speaking of those, I mean, just this week there were flags across North Carolina flying at half-staff in honor of Trooper Bullard. The governor ordered that to be happening until this evening at sunset. So just another way that the state and people really all across are honoring his memory and as well as his family.
Oh yes, and all of these American flags, you have them on the screen. Fire trucks with huge flags, North Carolina state flag, fire trucks, sheriff's department, and I'm overwhelmed. I'm always overwhelmed. I'm sorry that we have to endure times like this, but I'm always comforted and I'm always overwhelmed at how far across our nation people will fly or drive to come to show their respects and their support. Just a few moments ago, we had the man in law enforcement from the state of California. And I know we've had people to come in from up north, Connecticut, and outside of our state. And in all probability, there may be flags outside of our state flying at half-mast because, as we've said earlier, law enforcement is one big family. And they grieve together, they stand together, they pray together.
That's very, very important. We've seen that really all throughout the week is all the law enforcement family coming together for this. Right now you're looking, I believe that this is Red, White, and Blue Road, where there are folks lined up. We've been hearing from Bill O'Neill that not only are there family members or people who knew the family who just didn't go to the funeral, but there are also general members of the public in the community that felt compelled to come out and watch this procession happen. And as you were mentioning, Dr. Beatty, just kind of show another sign of respect and appreciation to the family for the sacrifice that they have made in sort of allowing for their family member to take on such a dangerous job.
You know, one of the amazing things I was just thinking about, I know something about this little town, Rhonda, North Carolina. I used to pastor not far from there. And I don't know if they ever got a stoplight or not. They didn't have one when I was familiar with the place. It's just a little far out place, way out from nowhere. And it's amazing how one person growing up in that community, given his life to do the best he could, believing that God led him to do this, has now brought the name of that little old town way out in the sticks. From one end of the United States of America, which goes to prove that anybody who will give their life and dedicate their life for a specific cause, God will exalt them and God will use them. And there are no nobodies in the sight of God. Everybody is somebody that God can use, and he chose to be used.
Let's go to our Kenny Beck, who is live outside of Wilkes Community College, where the funeral wrapped up just about an hour or so ago. Kenny.
Jared, yes, it's remarkable how quickly the story has shifted from Wilkes Community College to Rhonda and to that track in between. But nevertheless, we are here and we are still talking about everything that we have seen, everything that we have heard, and the images that will endure for a long, long time, that will have an impact on the lives of people who were here in person to witness it and people who are at home, perhaps seeing it for the very first time. I'd like to start with footage of the horse-drawn caisson arriving here on the campus of Wilkes Community College. If we have that queued up, it was stunning to see that happen live and in person. We were instructed by Highway Patrol prior to its arrival, about an hour and a half before its arrival, to be completely silent. Don't be on your phone, don't be talking to anybody back in your newsroom, and certainly don't be on television out of respect for the family. This was a stunning scene. We saw a man playing bagpipes as it approached. We saw these beautiful horses, officers dressed to the nines, stopping right in front of the center here where the funeral was, the Walker Community Center. One trooper getting off, presenting flags to the family. Lots of people wiping wiping away tears that we saw. They removed the casket from the caisson, and then the horses left, and the funeral began about 15 or 20 minutes later. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, one of just a handful of speakers today. A minister spoke, a representative from the Highway Patrol spoke, and the governor spoke during that funeral. It lasted for about an hour, just a few minutes shy of an hour, and afterwards the governor took a few quick questions from reporters. Here's the governor now.
Of course, they're heartbroken. All of the patrol is, his friends, but we are deeply grateful for his service and his sacrifice. This was an extraordinary young man who worked very hard and did what he's supposed to do. We're grateful for his life.
One other thing that the governor did not say during his sort of mini group gaggle press conference, but did actually say inside during prepared remarks, he said, "I know there are heavy hearts when someone is taken too soon. It can make us question forces seen and unseen, but our shared faith in God provides us with assurance and hope." That's what's happening now from Wilkesboro. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Kenny. Right now we're going to go to Red, White, and Blue Boulevard, which is where that processional is going through. We're going to listen in right now. We lost our shot there. That was the funeral processional going through Red, White, and Blue Boulevard in Wilkes County. I believe that our shot is back up now. Here you are taking a look once again. I've been watching the processional after the funeral for Trooper Samuel Bullard, who died just earlier this week. 24 years old, was killed in a car crash during a police chase. We're going to have much more on the funeral procession, as well as all the events that happened earlier today, coming up at 4 o'clock on WXI 12 News. Dr. Ron Bader, I want to thank you for joining us over the past hour or so.
It's been a privilege to be with you. Thank you so much for the coverage. This enables so many people in our area to be able to enter into the feelings of the funeral and the loss of this dear trooper, and we appreciate you all taking that into consideration.
Thank you very much. See you all at 4 o'clock.
News at 4 starts right now.
A North Carolina state trooper taken to his final resting place. Full coverage of the funeral for Trooper Samuel Bullard.
Plus, a look at your Memorial Day weekend forecast as the first named storm of the season churns in the Atlantic Ocean.
But first, this afternoon, family, friends, the community, even law enforcement from all around the country came to Wilkes County to say goodbye to a North Carolina state trooper killed in the line of duty.
The funeral took place today for Trooper Samuel Bullard. Our Bill O'Neill was along the procession route, but we're going to start off with Kenny Beck, who joins us live from Wilkes Community College, where that funeral happened earlier today. Kenny.
Right, Jared, where we were standing just a few hours ago, I wouldn't have been able to stand here because there were dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of members of law enforcement, their spouses, and other supporters here to say their goodbyes to the late Trooper Samuel Bullard. It was a remarkable scene. Funeral lasted for about an hour. We heard from North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. He spoke during that. We heard from a representative from the State Highway Patrol. We also heard from a minister who's actually a pastor at the church where the trooper's fiance currently attends. Right now, you are taking a live picture at where this story has shifted to since the procession left Wilkesboro and Wilkes Community College. This is the procession. It is en route right now to the church where the late trooper is set to be buried in just a short time. It is making its way to Macedonia Baptist Church in Rhonda. We have a team on the ground there. We will check in with those folks in just a little bit. But back here at the funeral, amazed at the sea of uniforms, the respect, the attention to detail that so many of these officers paid to their appearances today, to their salutes. It was truly an event filled with pageantry and the appropriate amount of appreciation and solemn gravity for a man who left us far too soon. He was just 24 years old. Among the folks from law enforcement here today, not just state troopers here from North Carolina, not just folks from border states, we caught up with a man who was a chief of the Highway Patrol out in Sacramento, California.
I've been pretty much swarmed. It's very humbling by hundreds of officers all the way up to very senior ranks who I think were a little surprised to see us there. But we know that in California we've had our share of line of duty deaths. And when we see troopers from around the nation, it is profoundly comforting in a way that I can't quite describe.
And we're going to talk a lot more about this fraternity, this brotherhood and sisterhood that is law enforcement, not just North Carolina, not just in the Carolinas, not just on the East Coast, but throughout the entire nation. A lot more to get to over the next 2.5 hours. But right now, we want to send things as the story begins to shift, literally and figuratively, from Wilkesboro to the nearby Rhonda community, about 20 miles away, where, again, Trooper Bullard set to be laid to rest in just a short period of time. My colleague Bill O'Neill is standing by with that part of our story. Bill.
A procession. I've never seen anything quite like it. The procession of cars from jurisdictions, law enforcement jurisdictions from across the state of North Carolina, as well as outside. It took at least 20 minutes for it to drive down here at Red, White, and Blue Road in Wilkes County. I cannot tell you how many cars took part in that procession. There were dozens, more than 100 people standing along this road waiting to pay their respects, and among them, a young mother and her 4-year-old son.
I work at Comp Center, and my brother is a police officer, he's a sheriff's deputy for Yadkin County, and my uncle is a police officer, so law enforcement is in my family, and this is a brotherhood, and we're here to honor our brother. I mean, he died doing what we do every day, and this is the only way that we can do it. We can honor him and stand by him, so pay our respects.
Part of the law enforcement community, others were family and friends, and some were just neighbors living here in Wilkes County, turning out today to pay their respects to Trooper Bullard and his family. In Wilkes County, I'm Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News.
Bill, thank you very much. As I mentioned before, back here live at Wilkes Community College outside the Walker Center where the funeral took place earlier today. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, one of 3 people to speak at Trooper Bullard's funeral. It lasted about an hour, beginning just before 1:30, wrapping up just before 2:30. The procession left here at about 2:45, and that's sort of the timetable for where we are right now. After speaking inside today, giving heartfelt words to the many mourners and the families in particular, the governor did a brief question and answer session with members of the media. He was asked, among other things, what are his emotions today and what he takes away from not only speaking with the Bullard family, but coming to know him more and know his story. Here's what the governor said.
And my heart is broken for this family and his friends and all of the patrol. What has been amazing, though, is how the Highway Patrol has pulled together, treated Trooper Bullard's family like their family.
Next, we want to take another live picture of that church in Rhonda, about 22 or so miles from where we're standing right now on the campus of Wilkes Community College. This is Macedonia Baptist Church. This is the church where, sadly, Trooper Bullard was planning to get married this August. Instead, it is where he will be laid to rest in just a few short minutes. Governor Cooper, among other things, adding today, when someone is taken from this life too soon, Trooper Bullard was just 24 years old, it can make us question forces seen and forces unseen. We don't have all the answers, but our shared faith in God provides us with assurance and hope. Much more from the governor, much more from various members of this law enforcement community and the national law enforcement community, and much more from police widows as well. They were out here in full force today as well, giving their support to the Trooper family throughout the next 2 hours here on WXII 12. Our team coverage will continue in just a little bit, but for now, Jared and Talitha want to send it back to you.
Thanks a lot, Kenny. 22-year-old Dakota Witt is being charged with second-degree murder in the death of Trooper Bullard. He was the man police say drove through that checkpoint, prompting the chase that led to Trooper Bullard's fatal crash.
For more on today's funeral, the procession, and the full investigation into his death, just head to our website, WXII12.com. All right, switch. And law enforcement from around the nation came together to say goodbye to a fallen North Carolina trooper.
Our Kenny Beck was outside of where that funeral happened and joins us now live with more on this. Kenny, set the scene for us.
Well, Talitha, Jared, good afternoon to both of you. I think it's important to remember Trooper Bullard was 24 years old. He died in the line of duty Monday night. They had less than 4 days to plan his funeral. But based on the pageantry and based on the turnout, you sure could not tell. An incredible scene, a breathtaking, poignant moment as a horse-drawn caisson led Trooper Bullard's casket to Wilkes Community College here, and in particular to the Walker Center. Complete silence all the way around. No one made a word. It was truly stunning to be able to witness this in person. The reverence of the moment is something that I personally will remember for a long, long time. I think it had a profound impact on a lot of people. As expected, an enormous turnout here today in Wilkesboro at the community college, and that includes troopers from across the country and a number of his brothers in the North Carolina Highway Patrol.
This is our time to mourn the loss of our fellow brother. For the last 2 days or 2.5 days, the entire Highway Patrol has been working very hard and making sure that we find the individuals involved. Also making sure that the logistics for this memorial are taken care of. There's been a lot of sleepless nights for everybody involved, and I think today allows everybody a chance to not only mourn but just depress and understand that we're losing one of our brothers and we're laying him to rest.
Powerful words during the funeral service as well from the presiding minister, Victor Church, a man who happens to be the pastor at the church where Trooper Bullard's fiancée currently attends services. He said, "We miss you greatly, we love you dearly, but we also celebrate your homecoming today." Live in Wilkesboro tonight, Kenny Beck, WXII 12 News.
We're losing one of our brothers and we're laying him to rest.
A North Carolina hero killed while protecting those he served. A community and a brotherhood now in mourning. Today, a salute to a trooper with a servant's heart, remembered for his love and passion. From the brothers he served alongside, to the strangers who lined the streets to pay their respects to a man who put their safety first. Tonight, we remember Trooper Samuel Bullard.
It's been a tough day for a lot of folks in Piedmont Triad. Trooper Samuel Bullard is the first North Carolina trooper killed in the line of duty since 2012.
Right now, he's being buried with full honors at Macedonia Baptist Church. That's located in Rhonda, where he was set to be married in a few months. The private memorial service and follows a service and 21-mile procession in which hundreds of people line the streets, as you see here, to say goodbye today.
Our Kenny Beck and Bill O'Neill watched as troopers, families, friends, even just strangers paid their respects. We're going to start tonight's coverage with Kenny Beck.
Jared, Talitha, good evening to both of you. All quiet here on the campus of Wilkes Community College tonight, but it was a much different story earlier today. The first troopers arriving here to pay their respects for his 1:30 funeral. Gosh, shortly after the sun came up, an impressive showing. And considering the fact that all of this was put together in less than 4 days, mind-boggling the logistics and reverence that went into today's events. Let's take you to, this was the scene at about 1:45, about 45 minutes before his funeral got underway. A horse-drawn caisson, along with a man playing bagpipes, brought to the Walker Center in Wilkesboro. This was an event attended by hundreds of members of law enforcement, both from the region and throughout the country. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, one of 3 speakers during the funeral, which we were able to sit and observe from an overflow room. The governor said, among other things, Trooper Bullard was filled with the spirit of service, which endures through his loss. Adding, when you have a chance to serve, let's do it, as Trooper Bullard would have done. After the event, the governor did a brief press conference gaggle with many members of the media gathered today. And among other things, he spoke about his emotions and his biggest takeaway from the hour-long funeral.
Trooper Bullard's life brings us all hope. I think that as tragic as all of this is, and as heartbroken as everybody is, that there is hope for the future. And it makes us want to make sure that we do all we can to support law enforcement across the state.
As much as this was about paying respects and as much as this was somber, it was also quite hopeful at times. Now, in addition to active members of law enforcement in North Carolina, in neighboring states, and in states across the country, this was also heavily attended by other members of the law enforcement community. And by that, I mean spouses. A number of police widows on hand today. Many of them make it their mission. Anytime any North Carolina law enforcement official loses their life in the line of duty, doesn't matter what part of the state it happens in, they make it their duty to go there and pay their respects, as so many people did for them. That includes the woman you were about to hear from, Paige Mast Blevins. She lost her own state trooper husband just a few years ago.
It does give reminders of what that day was like for us. But I also remember how grateful I was to see so many wonderful people come out and support us and support my late husband, and just show him honor that he deserved.
And that was a sentiment that we heard echoed many, many times today. And folks, not just paying their respects, showing reverence, showing appreciation and love for Trooper Bullard here in Wilkesboro. That trail of love went from here to nearby Rhonda, about 20 miles away. That's where we find our Bill O'Neill tonight with details on the procession that immediately followed today's funeral services. Bill, good evening.
Good evening, Kenny. I tell you, members of this community turned out hours in advance, and there were dozens of cars lined up and down this road as folks turned out. I tell you, there had to be cars, law enforcement vehicles from every jurisdiction of the state as well as outside the state. It took at least 20 minutes for all of those cars to proceed by down this red, white, and blue road right off of 421. In the procession, North Carolina Treasurer Dale Falwell, who shares with us what that experience was like.
One thing that you can't control, and that's a goosebump. And as I was coming through this procession and seeing all the flags and all the salutes and all the homemade signs, and all the things that were over the overpasses. It was a breathtaking thing, and none of us wish we were here right now on this beautiful Friday afternoon, but it was a great celebration of his life and honoring him and giving that ultimate sacrifice to our communities.
A number of people who turned out today had different stories as to why they were here. One story in particular stood out for me. A biker from Lexington came here today. He said that 16 years ago, a trooper pulled him over for DWI. He says that trooper helped him to get sober, find religion, turn his life around, and today he came back to pay his respects. In Wilkes County, I'm Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News.
Wow, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I think you need to check your pulse at home. Bill, thank you very much for sharing that and for all your work today. Close with this. For me, the most powerful part of the funeral, I tried to take copious notes throughout, was toward the very end when the presiding minister, who happens to be the pastor at Trooper Bullard's fiance's church, his name is Victor Church, he shared a letter that she wrote to him, Trooper Bullard, posthumously. She said, "You're the love of my life. I know God sent you to me. You always wrote the most special letters to me. You helped me become a better Christian. You loved me more than could ever be described. You were and always will be the best state trooper in my eyes. I know you died loving me with every single part of you." That's the story tonight from Wilkesboro. Kenny Beck, WXII 12 News.
Thanks a lot, Kenny. Well, full coverage of today's service is available on our free WXI 12 News mobile app. We also have interviews with Highway Patrol troopers, family members, and friends who knew Trooper Bullard. We're going to have much more of this coming up at 5:30.
Not a lot of people get to do what they want to do, and so while it was dangerous, I think he knew the dangers or the potential danger, but that didn't stop him from following his dream. And
it was a dream that he followed until the very end. Tonight, we're remembering Trooper Samuel Bullard as he takes his final journey home. Trooper's family, friends, and even strangers came to pay their respects to Trooper Bullard today.
The 24-year-old from Wilkes County was killed in a fiery crash during a chase earlier this week. But today, a special salute for the trooper from many members of his law enforcement family, as well as even strangers who gathered to pay their respects. And Governor Cooper spoke at today's service in Wilkes County. From there, Trooper Bullard was carried to Macedonia Baptist Church in Rono, where he was buried with full honors. Kenny Beck sat in on the funeral this afternoon.
Kenny, you heard people speak about Trooper Bullard's passion for service and his commitment to his family as well as his job. What will you remember most from that service?
I think probably what I'll remember most from the service was, not that the first part wasn't excellent, because it was, but the second half, and in particular when the presiding minister, who was also the pastor at Trooper Bullard's fiance's church, his name's Victor Church, his part was outstanding. Someone sang and performed Beulah Land. It's a very, very popular piece of music to be played at funerals. If I recall correctly, it was also played at the end of late Congressman Howard Coble's funeral many, many years ago. And Pastor Church came out and said, immediately after that song, he said, "Today I'm longing for Beulah Land. I am longing for a place where there are no more days like this and where there was no more lawlessness." There were also some moments of levity. They were brief, but they were also memorable. The pastor mentioned a series of text messages that he received from Trooper Bullard's fiancée, Michelle Mathis, the day that Trooper Bullard proposed to her. Apparently he proposed to her on Easter Sunday, April 1st. The pastor quipped, "Who proposes to somebody on April Fool's?" That got a few little giggles from the room during what was an otherwise obviously very, very somber day. And he shared Michelle's excitement. He read the text messages out loud. He said, she wrote to him, "Oh my gosh, Samuel just proposed to me at my grandparents' house." And he wrote back and said, "What did you say?" And she replied, "I laughed, I cried, and I finally said yes."
Wow, it's very touching indeed, Kenny. We've also been talking to People all week long who knew Trooper Bullard the best, many of them were at today's service, as we know, but so were people who never met him, total strangers. Talk a little bit about the connection that law enforcement officers have with others across the country.
Sure. Well, and for people who are part of this world, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. This is a strong fraternity that stretches across the country, and it involves people that you don't even know. If you put on the uniform, if you wear the badge, if you put your life on the line every single day, you are part of that team. You are part of that family, and it's a reciprocal relationship. This entire parking lot, which is essentially empty now, right in front of the Walker Center here at Wilkes Community College, was filled. It was a sea of uniforms today. It was impressive. It was a sight to behold visually, just to be in the same area as all these folks, dressed to the nines, saluting as the horse-drawn caisson came through and delivered Trooper Bullard's casket. After the fact, I started to look for some uniforms that didn't look familiar. People who were maybe outside of the state of North Carolina. Saw a few cowboy hats, troopers from Texas, troopers from Pennsylvania, troopers from Ohio. I caught up with a man who traveled almost 2,300 miles to be here.
I've been pretty much swarmed. It's very humbling by hundreds of officers all the way up to very senior ranks who I think were a little surprised to see us there. But we know that in California we've had our share of line of duty deaths. And when we see troopers from around the nation, it is profoundly comforting in a way that I can't quite describe.
And again, I think that gets back to this brotherhood, this sisterhood, this fraternity that exists when someone who puts on a uniform and keeps their community safe, gives their life keeping their community safe, that impacts communities all over the United States, frankly. Live in Wilkesboro, Kenny Beck, WXII 12 News.
Well, thank you so much, Kenny, for your perspective today. We're going to check back in with him in a little bit.
Short, heartbroken friends, family, and the entire law enforcement community are remembering the life of North Carolina Highway Patrol Officer Samuel Bullard. The 24-year-old trooper died in the line of duty in a fiery crash on Monday. Hundreds of people from across the region and really across the country have been paying their final respects as he is laid to rest. Our Bill O'Neill is live along today's procession route, but we're going to start off with Kenny Beck, who's live at Wilkes Community College, where Trooper Bullard's funeral service happened just a few hours ago. Kenny.
Well, Jared, a different type of silence here tonight outside of the Walker Center. That is because we are the only media crew that remains here. But earlier today, about 12:45 or so, just before the start of the trooper's funeral, a different kind of silence altogether. And this was a silence that was requested by the State Highway Patrol as Trooper Bullard's horse-drawn caisson made its way with a man playing bagpipes leading the procession right here to the building, where his body was then led inside. It was an impressive scene, to say the least. Hundreds of members of law enforcement from the state of North Carolina, the East Coast, and as you mentioned, all over the country, standing at attention. No one made a noise outside of the people leading that caisson. From there, Trooper Bullard's body went inside the funeral, where, among other people, Roy Cooper, North Carolina's governor, spoke. He told mourners, when someone's taken from this life too soon, it can make us question forces seen and unseen. We don't have all the answers, but our shared faith in God provides us with assurance and hope. Afterwards, the governor also spoke with the media.
My heart is broken for this family and his friends and all of the patrol. What has been amazing, though, is how the Highway Patrol has pulled together and treated Trooper Bullard's family like their family. And I'm grateful for all of the families out there who allow their family members to serve in law enforcement across the state, because we know it is a risk, and we know it requires courage, and we know that sometimes that there is sacrifice.
Governor, again, one of several people to speak. We also heard from Trooper Bullard's fiance's pastor, who had a number of lovely things to say, and we also heard from a representative from the North Carolina Highway Patrol. That pastor in particular, Victor Church, mentioning the fact that the family and loved ones have described the love and prayers and outpouring of support since the dreadful news Monday night of this 24-year-old man's passing, described it as incredible and amazing. Now, from Wilkesboro, Everyone who was attending the graveside service about 22 miles away, also in Wilkes County and nearby Rhonda, took part in a procession, and that was a sight to see as well. It left Wilkesboro, hopped onto 421, and Sky 12 gives you a remarkable view of that. So many flashing lights, so many flashing blue lights in particular, and you can probably see it if you look closely enough. So many people, many of whom probably had never even met Sam Bullard before, pulled off to the side of the road, paying their respects, and in a small way, helping so many grieving families, Bullard's parents and Bullard's fiance's family, grieve and get through this dreadfully sad and dreadfully difficult day. That's where our team coverage continues tonight. Let's go to Bill O'Neill. He is live in Rhonda. Bill, you were part of that procession today, speaking with people who were pulled off on the side of the road.
Yeah, what an amazing procession, Kenny. I spoke with a spokesman for the patrol. He tells me they lost count trying to figure out how many law enforcement agencies from in North Carolina, outside of North Carolina, taking part in that procession today. I can tell you, we watched patrol car after patrol car roll past us on Red, White, and Blue Road for more than 20 minutes. That's how big this procession was. And the crowd that turned out, equally impressive. There were folks there that were friends, there were families of the Bullards, but there were also a number of people just from the community who turned out wanting to pay their respects, and among them, a story that stands out for us. A biker from Lexington tells us why he came today.
16 years ago, a trooper pulled me over and gave me a DWI, talked to me about Jesus, from the time of the breathalyzer all the way to the jailhouse. And because of that trooper, I gave my life to Christ, got baptized, and been serving the Lord ever since. And so I've got a soft spot for the state troopers. And I rode the motorcycle from Thomasville in the rain up here today. Just pay my respects.
One of the many people who turned out today watched the funeral procession here in Wilkes County. Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News.
Remarkable story on a remarkable day. Bill, many thanks. That procession ended with a private graveside service at Macedonia Baptist Church in the town of Rhonda, not far from where Bill was just reporting live. That is the church that Trooper Bullard grew up in. He had recently proposed to his girlfriend. That proposal, we learned today, happened on Easter Sunday, April 1st. The two were set to be married this August. Now, in addition to law enforcement, members of law enforcement from the state of North Carolina and around the country themselves, the law enforcement community, families, spouses, and in particular, police widows turned up in big numbers today as well. I spoke with a few of them today. They all shared similar sentiments that, yes, today is difficult for them too because it reopens the wound, but it is also critically important for them to be here. Many of them seek out funerals in the state of North Carolina anytime a uniformed member of our state law enforcement gives their life to service.
They're tough. I mean, and it's you know, you have a lot of people around for a while, but then people start disappearing, and then you have all that downtime, and that's when reality starts to set in.
And sadly, that will be reality for the Bullards and also for the Mathis family in the weeks ahead. Jared, I will leave you with this. Closing words that we heard earlier today from another speaker, the third and final speaker during the funeral today. This was Colonel Glenn McNeil Jr. with the Highway Patrol. He looked right at Michelle Mathis. That is Sam Bullard's fiance. And he told her the State Highway Patrol stands with you, and we stand behind you this day and every day going forward. Live in Wilkesboro tonight, Kenny Beck, WXII 12 News.
Tough couple of months for a lot of people. Thanks a lot, Kenny. Samuel Bullard is now the 63rd North Carolina Highway Patrol officer killed in the line of duty since 1929. He's the 10th from the triad. Well, the man faces a number of charges, including second-degree murder. Dakota Witt was arrested 2 days ago. Earlier this week, Highway Patrol explained why he's charged with murder. They say that the district attorney's office ruled that that charge is appropriate since Witt put other drivers and troopers in danger with that chase, and his actions led to Trooper Bullard's death. Well, some continuing coverage tonight on the apartment fire.